Yeah, we should visit.
We we are live. Good evening, everyone. It is Thomas Hampson. It's Thursday. It must be a chit chat with Tom on IDAGIO or IDAGIO.com, where classic music happens, and we are really going to be happening program this evening. I love this Thursday evening series because with all the COVID and all the craziness, we've lost so much physical contact with colleagues and friends across the business that this Thursday night respite, I get a little cup of something here and call up one of my good friends or somebody I've never met before who's in the classical industry and have a wonderful conversation with you. And we very much appreciate all of your dropping by and watching and picking up later and watching it. It's been a wonderful series, and it's thanks to you. And the reason why I'm saying all that is because we are actually celebrating 1 year, 12 months. For 12 months, I have been doing a Tuesday and Thursday evening Idagio live series for you, one based in song and the other based in the classic music ecosystem. And no reason to stop now. We've just gotten started. And without any further ado, one of my favorite people on the planet, and that's no exaggeration, Francesca Zambello. How are you?
I'm great, Tom. Thank you so much for that nice intro. My goodness, you're one of my favorite people too, and I'm so happy to see you.
And it's so
Uh,
ridiculous that we haven't seen each other for so long. This is unusual.
I know, I know. We've been 1 year in Cooperstown, New York, and we just celebrated that the other day. And
All right. So you have
yeah,
you weren't down you have an apartment in New York, and of course you're in Washington as well with DC. But you guys have actually been living in Cooperstown.
we have been living in Cooperstown. We've been to New York
Wow.
occasionally and to DC occasionally. And our son, whose school is in New York City, is
Yeah.
digital. And my wife runs her law firm from here. And I've been, mostly running things from my home office, which you're, seeing the wall behind here.
Nice
And,
pictures.
yeah, it's like whatever you put up, everybody's looking at. So I've gone with the neutral look.
I
This is
love
the
it.
country wood look.
You can't go wrong with Naughty Pine. But I mean, okay. So I mean, jumping into, I do want to. And one of the fun things about this series, as I said, is that I've been meeting a lot of people I wouldn't meet naturally,
Mhm.
or whatever that means normally.
Normally, maybe.
I think normally is probably better.
Yeah.
But but the folk, my colleagues that I do know very well, it's really wonderful to have to give you a window where people who may, well, certainly so many people know your name and know your work and know who you are, but they might not know that much about you. And I don't want to make this a this is your life segment here, but maybe somewhere between this is your life and Wikipedia. I think. When did you consciously, you were raised in Europe, but you were born in New York. Your parents are various assortments of intellectuals, and you can tell us what you want about that. I'd love to know. I'd love to know first of all, when was the first time you could say to somebody, "I speak five languages"?
Well, I was very lucky that my father was Italian and we learned Italian growing up. And he worked for an airline, TWA, defunct. And I was born in New York and we moved to Paris when I was 10. And so learned French. My mother was American, she was an actress. And so learned French. And then they moved to Vienna. And so went there, learned German, um, and then
Are
when I
you
was
moving
in,
around? Are you moving around because Dad is being centered in
yeah,
different
his
TWA
dad is
places?
going to different places. And my mother kept working as an actress in all these places. So I got to be around the theater all the time. And when I was in university, I went to Moscow for a year and learned Russian. So it's like when I was 20, I could say I have the five languages, which I'm very grateful for. It's, of course, invaluable in this profession.
Oh my God.
Although everybody speaks everything now. But I was really grateful for that upbringing and for the
Did
exposure to so many people.
did mom and dad speak Italian to one another?
No, my mother was very American. She was from Chicago, totally American. She did not. She she was not a linguist. My father was a linguist. My brother's a linguist. But she was really, slow on the language front.
Okay.
And so it was just a great way to grow up and a great way to be in Europe. And then, of course, to continue working there as life evolved.
What was music like in the house?
Music was my mother was very into musicals, and so she did a lot of musicals as an actress, and so I had a big exposure to musicals starting at about age 5. And classical was more from my grandmother, who was a pianist.
Okay.
And actually, amazingly, the piano in our apartment in New York was her piano from when she was a student in Berlin. And she knew Brahms. I have a signed picture of Brahms above the piano, which I deeply love. And so she taught me piano, and that was
Wow.
really intro to classical. But opera came in some ways through my father, but opera really came later, like once I was in college and I discovered Wagner.
I
And
was
that
Wagner
was
first. So
what
what was your first of all, your mom as an actress in musicals, does that mean she was an actress who also sang?
Yes, she sang, but she sang, music theater. She was in tons of
Yeah, sure.
musicals while I was growing up. And so that was really my first exposure was I was backstage a lot with her, from like age 5, um, in New York. And then she did a lot of summer stock and touring. And when my brother and I were young kids, we ended up going with her. Of course, everything would be illegal to do that now, to have kids like sleeping in dressing rooms. Um, but it was
Are you that
invaluable.
doesn't happen at Glimmerglass?
We're a little more
You
cautious
know,
about those things.
you know what? I've often thought if I was, going back 25 years, if I was or 35 years younger, or how many hundreds of years younger, and doing that, I probably would buy an Airstream trailer and just trailer, especially if you're working in America so much. Deborah and David Holloway kind of did that. Way back in the day in the 70s and in the early 80s when he was traveling around and doing all these things.
Well,
Just
do
popped in
you
my mind.
know the tenor Clay Hilly?
Yeah,
He's like a Siegfried. He has a trailer and he travels around New York in his trailer. I
perfect.
mean, all around America in his trailer. So I hear you.
These professional golfers like Davis Love the third, he's got they travel in these unbelievable buses, that have been
Yes.
these 1.5 million retooled, drivable, apartments. I mean, it's amazing, and that's the golf tour. A lot of it, or the golfers will either drive faster or fly, and then their home will be chugging across to the next golf tournament. I wonder if we're going to see things like that develop, or if it's too
I
late.
think I think we're going to see a lot more. I want to say location centric, community
Yeah,
centric performing. It's going to take a while for travel to really open up, I think, especially how we used to like go back and forth and I got to be here, I got to be there. I mean, for one, I'm going to be, just focusing in a little bit. I think it won't hurt people. I mean, listen, of course, looks artists on your level, you're going to be going all over the world still, but maybe not. Maybe it'll be more constructive for people to focus more on just a couple of theaters. In a way, going back to the system that was so
the answer. Yeah,
prevalent in Germany. I mean, the fest system, and I mean, I'm looking at that in Washington and keeping sort of groups of people closer to us, and providing them with ways to be able to work there more. And so people, it's not like people need to live in New York,
right.
Vienna anymore. People can live anywhere.
Before we get into the industry and the couple of
Yeah.
houses you run and all that, let me pick up a couple of strings. So where did the academics really start kicking in? Were you always a good student? Did it always interest you? What did you study in college, university? How did your maturation process bring you into literature, opera, theater directing? Was it opera that you wanted to direct from the get-go, or did you
I
just?
think
I mean, what was
I
on?
was, I always wanted to be a director. I
Okay,
think because I didn't want to be a performer. And starting, from an early age with my mother, I was backstage so much and I was totally fascinated. I used to like sit with the stage manager. And for viewers who are watching, that's the person who's generally running backstage from a desk somewhere. And I became fascinated with scenery moving and with, people running off and on stage and sort of the whole picture. And I tell you, I started, writing shows and putting them on underneath the piano, where I would make a puppet theater under the piano. And by the time I got to high school, I was in Paris and I was directing plays in high school. And in college, I didn't study theater. I majored in philosophy and English, which I think of our generation, getting a liberal arts education has been really invaluable. But as I moved to New York immediately after and started working in the theater. I started working as a stage manager for several different off-Broadway theater companies. But I used to go to New York City Opera a lot, and my family was still living in Vienna then. And so several summers I spent in Vienna, going to the opera all the time. And I became really fascinated by the fact that the stories were so much bigger and felt more powerful than so much theater. And so much theater in America in that kind of 80s was too naturalistic, too television centric. And I just realized there was this incredible theater going on, particularly in Germany. I ended up getting an Hospitant thing initially in Frankfurt, where my parents had then moved at that point. And I was just taken by opera, and I kept working in the theater and have, to some degree, particularly musicals over my career. But I always felt that opera told stories that were bigger than human scale. That's not to say that they always have to be, but there is a level of emotion that music conveys, and that so much of the poetry and the text of so many works is really so thrilling to dive into. And so that I began to work more and more in opera. I mean, I got a job working as an assistant director at the San Francisco Opera, and it was
but that was a big deal, wasn't it? And wasn't that with Jean-Pierre? That was Jean-Pierre Ponel.
Well, actually, I wasn't working with Jean-Pierre then. I was just a house assistant, and thanks to Sarah Billinghurst, who many professionals in our field know, who later became the number 2 at the Met, and is now retired. She was working at San Francisco at that time. And we had great directors coming there, great directors. And it was just so eye-opening to me. And she recommended me to Jean-Pierre Ponel, very famous opera director. And I went and had an interview with him actually in New York, because he was going to be working in Italy at La Fenice and needed an assistant. And I guess all of his regular assistants, many of whom gone on to great careers in this profession, nobody was available. And so it was really, for me, one of those right place, right time gigs. He had to go into a cure in Germany. And so he couldn't do the first several weeks of rehearsal. And the opera was Rossini's Otello. And so I got to do the first couple of weeks of rehearsal at La Fenice. I was quite young, and
how did that work? Was it a standing production?
No, it was a brand new production, which is very uncommon. Normally, as an associate or assistant director, you do a revival. But I went to this cure house in Germany. I can't even remember where it was, where he was having some sort of cleansing, and I spent a week there with him, going through the score, going through his designs and his concept and his approach to the piece. And it was sort of like he was directing the whole thing, but he had never directed it. And so then I went to La Fenice, which was, it was a great cast. It was Curtis Ram and June Anderson. And I basically put it on its feet for him, and he came, and he was very, very happy, thank goodness. And then I worked for him.
He is legendary for not being very, very happy.
Right, but he was an amazing director, and I definitely, he was one of the people I feel grateful that I learned a lot from. I mean, I think this profession, particularly for a director, there's a level of technique, but there's also a level of, creativity that has to go into everything. And from him, I really learned a lot about technique, about certain things, but also about how to translate creativity into reality. And that's really one of the difficult parts of directing.
That's a powerful sentence. That's a powerful insight for those of us who don't work on your side of the fence. I mean, I get it as an artist, but that's a wonderful thing to have said to a general public. That's wonderful. Apropos Jean-Pierre, I was with him the
Well,
last 4 years live.
Yeah,
I did all 3 De Pontes with him in various theaters, and I mean, my Met debut was with Jean-Pierre, with an incredible cast, La Notte di Figaro. But nevertheless, he was an extraordinary man. It hurts a little bit being the older statesman now amongst casts in whatever I'm doing. And even, well, this has been on for maybe 10, 15 years, and even working with other directors who don't know. They might know the name Jean-Pierre Ponel, but they don't know what that means anymore. It's not that for 20 years after working with him and after his death. I mean, can you imagine? He died, he was 57 years old.
Right. No, he was he was young for a director.
Correct.
And I mean, from him, I learned so much just about character and text and how to use text through music and studying your score. And he was also, and I've sort of carried this myself, is that, the person who is your associate or assistant, you spend a lot of time with them, you eat a lot of meals with them, and it's really important to get somebody you like, because there were certain things that he used to say, and I'll share this with you as a singer, if I may, that, he used to say, don't socialize with the singers, because it will backfire in rehearsals. And
it's true.
And I think it's true. And he always used to say, if your work as a director isn't done by the piano dress rehearsal, then you're never going to get it done. Because after that, it's really up to the conductor. And, there's certain things that I was fortunate that I think great directors or impresarios said to me along the way. And those are things that I think about all the time with him. And his attention to detail, but also how to get the best out of a singer and how to let them bring what they can bring to the process.
Well, as a singer in that process, it was clear, and that's sort of an age, and you come from that and you're like this. But I see this more and more, that the generations behind me, the couple that are working, they're hired because they look and sound right, and they get into production, and it's a great experience. But when you worked with Jean-Pierre Ponel, your game went up.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you came out there, regardless of what it was, you just came out, and he was very focused on that. You just had a better technique at what you do. And I don't see I don't see that kind of concern or concentration on that as a development process for young singers. But we can talk about that. We can talk about that later. Was there any other producer that was seminal in your experience?
Well, I was also lucky. There used to be something called the National Opera Institute, which was a precursor to Opera America. And I got a grant from them for 1 year, actually before I worked for Jean-Pierre, which was to follow around the stage director, Nathaniel Merrill, who was a stalwart at the Met for many years.
I never worked with him.
There are many great productions of his that were in the Met repertory for a long time, Rosenkavalier and Meistersinger. And I worked with him in a number of, particularly in Germany and in Finland. And then he took me also to Chicago, which ended up then leading to me being hired there. He was really great at sort of the organizational, when I talk about the craft side of directing, how to organize a chorus, how to plan supers, how to work with a designer, not just conceptually, but also to be able to serve the piece that you want, just the logistics of so many aspects of production, and from him, I really learned about how to direct a chorus, how to handle, 100 people,
right.
and how to organize it. Yes. And because so many directors may come from the theater where you're often not dealing with these numbers, the numbers
Mm,
of like a big chorus,
mm,
a lot of supers, dancers, blah
mm,
blah, and scale. From him I learned scale. In a way, it was two things. Like from him I really learned how to deal with scale, and with
mm-hmm.
Jean-Pierre it was really about I would say much more like personne en régie, really
Yeah.
how to direct somebody, how to help them connect with a character. And because
Mm,
everything comes from character, right?
mm.
That's like how the story is told, and how the music informs the character, how the words inform the character, and how to get that out of somebody. So I guess to those
I was
two.
just thinking of I did a apropos of course I have I did a Tannhäuser production, and it was the whole thing was invented over bunches of glasses of wine, you could tell, and they actually got to working, and they had the poor guy had no real clue other than just sort of ach Mensch doch ja,
Right.
and then the chorus showed up.
Yeah,
And
well,
I thought he was going to shoot himself. I mean,
yeah,
he had never, I'm not sure he'd ever seen anything with that many people in a chorus, but I mean, if you don't know what to do with the second act prelude, I mean, and the march,
I
and
mean
it was just literally Bambi in the headlights. It was,
right,
and
right.
we soloists, being the cruel bastards that we are, just sort of snickered behind his back. He wasn't particularly pleasant either. He wasn't very humble about the fact that he was in way over his head. But the reason I mentioned that was not to make fun of this person who remains nameless. Is that I can well imagine that specific technique of 30, 50, 100, and like you say, supers. I mean, I think a lot of people, and I want to drill down just briefly on this. I mean,
Yeah.
when we talk about supers, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about people who are not singing, nor that they very well could be from the community that they've hired on, and they're carrying the spear, or they're the soldiers, or for a famous example would be the soldiers that that shoot Cavaradossi at the end of Tosca. That can go disastrously bad if you don't have somebody who knows, at this point, go on, do this, look there, go off. There's a couple very funny, disaster stories about that. But the movement, when people go to the opera and they see, of course, the first focus obviously is the singing person who's standing there, and the hearing environment and the seeing of the set. But I think a lot of times how that keeps moving into a world that seems a real world at that time gets underestimated. And that is really what you do, isn't it?
Well, that is a huge part of a director's job, especially when you're doing, the big repertory.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done,
Well, I remember we did tell together. But I mean,
yeah,
Troyen
right,
must be a
right.
nightmare.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, I love big chorus operas, because the choruses, they're often a huge part of the story, but also they create the world often that the soloists live in. And so, I don't know, I've done, things like War and Peace and Boris Godunov,
Yeah, yeah.
Avanchina, the Trojans, Good where the chorus is such an integral part of the piece. And as a director, I really relish working with them, particularly, there's so many great opera house choruses, and
Yeah.
obviously the Met, San Francisco, Chicago, English National Opera, the Royal Opera House, the Paris Opera. These are all choruses where I've had just really profound relationships with these groups of people, where they are just so key to your work as a director. A
Yeah.
chorus, sometimes they can make or break a production
True.
subtly in a way that you may not realize, because they are part of the huge support system, the fabric of everything. And
But I've
it's
seen that
important to get it right.
I've seen that up close with you. I mean, one of my favorite stories is slightly humorous, but I've seen that up close with you. You handle chorus members with the same equanimity and honesty and integrity as you do the soloists. They all have their stories to tell. The soloists have a different story, different context, but you and they respond to that. My favorite story is when we were doing Guillaume Tell in Paris. No, this is one of your language stories.
Okay.
And choruses, okay, with all respect and due praise, choruses are maybe not the most rehearsal friendly group of people sometimes, and if the focus starts to leak a little bit, it can get sort of, okay, can I have everybody's attention here, and if you had $1 for every time you did that, you wouldn't need a fee. So we're in the midst of a tedious, I mean, Guillaume Tell, you've got to get the different cantons together, and we've got the Schwyz and we've got the Juries and whatever else, and people are losing concentration and so forth, and they keep sort of, and it was getting on your nerves because it was just a sound level, rightfully so. We were all sort of going, can we just, and you're in Paris, and of course you're working in French, nobody gets that, but a lot of the chorus members, especially the men chorus members, were actually Russian immigrants. And so there was a clique of them having a go at all this bullshit behind your back in Russian. And at one point you just got quiet. You turned around to this sort of clique and in immaculate, as far as I can tell, immaculate Russian, encouraged them that perhaps they should keep their comments quieter to themselves, pay attention, or get a different job, and you'd be happy to help them leave the theater. And these in Russian to these guys. I mean, the last thing that these guys possibly thought was going to happen that day was to be dressed down by an American French-speaking producer, Russian-speaking. I will never forget that as long as and the look on these boys' faces. I mean, it was fantastic. So anyway, kudos.
I don't remember that, but okay.
Oh, I was deeply impressed. I thought it just was such a wonderful moment. And the attention span just went up 10 paces. I mean, it was like everybody beamed right in on the production. Anyway, I get that. So what I mean, you have so many. When did you start running theaters? I mean, and why is that something that you want to do? You've been at Glimmerglass since 2010. You've been at Washington since 2012. You have been an advisor to I don't know how many theaters, but quite extensively to San Francisco. You've had long relationships with, and I've always gotten the feeling that it's not just the productions you do, but you're one of those go-to people from administrations in the opera world. Did that just come about, or did you think, well, if I'm going to take this to the next level, I should run a theater?
Well, I think it was one of those things where I spent, the 80s, the 90s, and the aughts as a freelance director, and it just everywhere in the world. And I mean, of course, there were a lot of mountains to climb up. There weren't a lot of women in the field when I was getting going. It was difficult in a way. Sometimes it was easier in Europe. Funnily enough, I got a lot more jobs in Europe, particularly through the 90s, like much more than in the States, except for San Francisco and a couple, Houston and Santa Fe were really user friendly to me. But at a certain point, after you've been doing this for 30 years or so, and you've worked in a lot of places that you want to work, and you realize the places that you haven't worked, they're not going to hire you. So you might as well just think about what's next. And I really started to feel like I want to give back. I wanted to be involved in a situation where, and of course I had been, you're right. I mean, been fortunate to work with a lot of companies and general directors and music directors, and just be in those dialogue conversations about where's the theater going and what would be better and what kind of repertory and who should we bring in here. And working in so many theaters around the world, you see everything. And so you're often a person who people call and say, what do you know about, or what do you think? But I decided I wanted to give back. I wanted to be particularly working with younger people. And so it was at like a train at the right time, at the right place, where the board of trustees of Glimmerglass called me and asked me, was I interested in that company? And I had been offered several other companies the prior decade, and I didn't feel ready. I didn't, and Glimmerglass was a perfect situation. For those who don't know, it's a summer festival in Cooperstown, New York, 3 hours and a bit from New York City, and so I thought, what a great opportunity, because education is so much part of it. But also I realized I could address not just education and training, not just for singers, but for everybody in the field. Really mentoring, administrative production people and everything. And I just thought, what a perfect opportunity to, sort of to retool a theater that was going through a time of transition. And so it was like the right place, right time. And it's been a wonderful collaboration with the company. We've built it up really into a festival, brought it, made so many
And
other
how?
parts, not just opera, but we do musicals.
Mm.
We do a lot of things for youth. We have a huge lecture series. We used to have regular collaborations with the likes of, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and so many others. And of course, you, Tom. And just for me, it's been an invaluable place to work on community all the way up to international, to work on, like, we have an active prison program at Attica Prison where we bring opera there to, people coming from around the world to see our work. And so that was that. And then Washington, I really wasn't looking, but then Michael Kaiser,
Mm-hmm.
Placido was leaving, and
Mm-hmm.
Michael Kaiser I had known very well from the Royal Opera House. When he was running there, I was directed many things under his tenure, and he said, "Would you consider being the artistic director here?" And for me, it was just at a certain point in life, you're like, cutting down on travel, staying
Yeah,
more
sure.
focused,
Sure.
building something. And it was a perfect thing. I had just married Faith. We've been together. We've been married 10 years. We have a son, and so it was like, oh, Washington, D.C., I could be the artistic director there in Cooperstown, and everything fits on the train. It was just, a lot of my colleagues, are on the planes all the time. And I just felt like I could do a lot at the Kennedy Center. It's an amazing facility. And, to be in the nation's capital and really be engaged in so many issues, not just opera. So it was
Kennedy
like I
Center must
wanted it, it
be,
happened.
yeah. Kennedy Center is just well, and the organic connection between the young generation and Glimmerglass and the starting and the developing in
Yeah.
Washington. I mean,
I
it's a
mean,
very, it's a
yeah,
and of course and DC. I did have before you. I apologize, but I had Deborah Rutter on the show up last fall sometime and got caught up with her and her musical talents that probably
yeah,
people don't really realize. But also having a good conversation. I think quite interesting for people. A director of a major institution like the Kennedy Center, what that means. What are all these silos? What are all these responsibilities? And also in generally in the world of arts. And admittedly, this conversation and that conversation are very American centric. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, Cooperstown, New York, is the home of the Baseball Hall of Fame, which of course I visited a couple of times, being an avid baseballer American boy. But it's also the stomping ground and inspiration ground of the famous James Fenimore Cooper. And the Leatherstocking Tales were in fact in part written and inspired from tales in that part of the woods. So it's a if you're going to Tanglewood and you go up whatever that into interstate
87.
is, 87, and you go to the right through the Berkshires and up into Tanglewood, cool. But what you might want to do is just keep on going a little bit more, wrap around this way, and then go across some of the most beautiful country on the face of America, off and through the land, and get to Cooperstown and get to Glimmerglass. And it's like driving into, well, first of all, don't hit the Amish wagons. Uh, be very careful. But it's a magical place. And you have created something quite extraordinary. The theater was built is a new theater under your watch, isn't it?
No, it was built under my
Aha, I
predecessor,
thought,
Paul Kellogg.
but
Wonderful.
expanded.
Yes.
The campus is certainly, yeah.
We have expanded the campus and the facilities and the programming just to really make it more of a
Programming without
festival.
question.
And with a strong connection to what I call socially responsible programming, just so many different aspects of connecting our art form to ideas and content of what we can think about today. And that's somewhat of an anomaly in the United States, whereas of course in Europe, particularly in Germany, it's much more common. But here, I think it's been very successful and very appreciated. And of course, when we get back after COVID, as we all figure out what we're going to do, I think that's going to be one of the key parts of what we do.
Right. Well, let's just focus on Glimmerglass for a minute. I tried to find, I mean, you sent it to me, that incredibly adorable film of you as going through in snow, deep in snow. Wouldn't
Yeah.
you snow? It's one of, but I was surprised to see that it wasn't actually on the website, at least up at the
Oh,
front
it
of it,
is.
of
It is.
Glimmerglass.
It is.
It
Okay.
is?
All
All
right.
right, hang on.
Okay.
What we can do is we'll have a little fun here and a little bit of screen sharing. And we're going to go here. Actually, I already had keyed up the ring, but go to Glimmerglass. Where is it?
Okay. Well, I
Glimmerglass
can't.
Festival. I don't know. But anyway, you have these are the titles for the summer. But I mean, forget about it. It's an adorable. Folks, find it. It's on. It's a wonderful. Maybe it's under. I don't think it's under buy now, but it must be something, some place where they talk about the coming season, and it is absolutely a wonderful. Support Glimmerglass glimpses. All these. You'll visit. Prepare. Maybe it's under prepare. Whether what to do.
I'm
Anyway,
gonna I'm
it's a,
gonna put it up in the chat for you in a second. Would that be
it's
okay?
yeah, absolutely, and it's really quite adorable. But Glimmerglass, as you can see, is a wonderful atmosphere. But tell me, what does this mean for this season? Let's just talk specifically about this season. You
Well,
you you
it,
built some extra outside viewing
yeah, we
performance
have built.
places.
We are currently building an outdoor stage. Instead of our beautiful theater, we have a beautiful 1,000-seat theater that
It is a
we
beautiful theater.
and of course, since we can't be in it, we have decided to create an outdoor venue. And the outdoor venue is holds about, currently by government restrictions, only about 350. But we are hoping that Governor Cuomo is going to move things and let us, let us get more people there. Um,
Well, is
so
there a chance if the numbers are significantly down in that area that there may be a lessening of for specifically that area? I mean, that's a huge festival area in general. Oh, here we go. We can have a look at that.
yeah,
I mean, is it possible that the Berkshires and Tanglewood? I mean, Tanglewood's going ahead publicly as well. You
Tanglewood's
guys are going.
going ahead. We're going ahead. Jacob's Pillow. So I encourage people to come to this region.
Sure.
Particularly Americans who are culture lovers who aren't going to Europe this year. We want you to come see us. We have built this purpose-built outdoor theater. Everything we're doing is 90-minute adaptations of Trovatore and Pericole, and we have an amazing group of singers. Eric Owens, Isabel Leonard, Latanya Moore. It's just, we've got some great singers in a great outdoor venue in a very different kind of experience. 90 minutes shows, no intermissions, very, very safe,
Cool.
following all protocol. And I think that's what we're all going to have to do for a while.
And will you have also when I was up there, we were doing the Song of America thing. I mean, we had, well, of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was up there, which was always fun to see, either her in Santa Fe or in
Yeah.
Glimmerglass, and God rest her soul. But also you had Margaret Atwood. I mean, you have a kind of a presentation lecture series. Can you do that digitally?
We have been doing it digitally. We've had a really great series called Glimmerglass Glimpses that we've run off and on for the last year. And we will continue that. We will not have those people live. We're going to do that starting next year in 2022, when we'll be back, but I think back in a different way, but we'll be in our theater. And we may keep the outdoor theater. I don't know. I think everybody in opera used to plan, so far ahead. And now I think it's really
Yeah.
up to everybody to just, let's plan for the moment and do what is safe and what responds to audiences. Audiences are changing so much, what people want, what people are willing to do, what they want to spend, what they don't want to spend, what they want to see.
I want to talk about that. This is the New York. This is a picture of
That's
what you're
the
building.
stage. Yes, that's the outdoor
And this is an
stage.
article in the I accept. Yeah, move on. I don't know why it does this.
Yes, in the
I
New York
belong to.
Times. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the film? This isn't a
Uh,
live film. This is just the stage you're building, right?
this is just the stage we're building.
That's very cool. That
Yeah,
is
I think
actually
it's
where the cars used to get parked.
Yes, and we're building a sort of everyone gets a square, a 6 foot square, which is safe.
I'll look at this.
And
There's a link to your video presentation. Should we just have a peek?
sure,
You
have
are
a peek.
it's 5 minutes long. We won't play the whole thing, but have you, ladies and gentlemen, this is really just too much fun.
I'm currently just over 1,000 feet above sea level in Cooperstown, New York. Winter here has been long. Sometimes it has been lonely, isolated, and cold. In many ways, this year feels as though it is moving at a glacial pace. But I walk this tundra with hope and a vision for our 2021 festival opening July 15th. The Glimmerglass Festival has survived because of you, because of your support. And now it's time to put our artists and artisans back to work to bring you a festival unlike any other you have experienced at Glimmerglass. With the health and safety of our staff, artists, audience members, and community top of mind, we invite you to join us this summer for a socially distanced festival where you will experience reimagined operas in the most ventilated area we could find, the great outdoors. For this, we are building a new stage on our campus and creating new infrastructures to help our community enjoy opera and music theater in the safest way possible. Bring up to 3 of your closest friends or family members to share your slice of heaven. What do I mean by that? Our festival lawn will be divided into distanced areas that may each be shared by up to 4 people. Or choose to enjoy your performances from your festival box, which can seat 6 people comfortably. Each performance will be 90 minutes long and will be accompanied by the beautiful sounds of the Glimmerglass Festival Orchestra. This summer, you can look forward to performances of some amazing operas. First off, Mozart's The Magic Flute, a whimsical tale of love and wisdom, great for audiences of all ages. Our new production is directed by N.J. Aguna, conducted by Joseph Culinary, and stars Eric Owens with members of our Young Artist program. If a dramatic thriller is more your speed, you can look forward to Verdi's Il Trovatore, directed by myself, conducted by Joseph Culinary, with performances by LaTanya Moore, Rayanne Bryce Davis, Michael Mays, Gregory Kundi, and Eric Owens. Or travel with us to The Big Easy for a Mardi Gras-themed production of Offenbach's hilarious and touching Songbird. I will co-direct this with Eric Schoenvogel, and it will be conducted by James Lau and stars Isabel Leonard and William Burden. For the Wagnerians, we present leading singers in Gods and Mortals, an event featuring selections from Wagner's Die Feen, Tannhäuser, and The Ring Cycle. This will star Alexandria Scheiner, Ian Kosiara, Eric Owens, Bill Burden, and Rayanne Bryce Davis. This season, we welcome Denise Graves to star in a new work about Mary Cardwell Dawson, founder of the National Negro Opera Company. Written by Sandra Seaton, with original music by composer Carlos Simon and music direction by Kevin Miller. Whether you bring a chair or a blanket or enjoy one of our picnic tables, I look forward to welcoming you from a distance to our beautiful grounds this summer.
And then we that's that. Oops! Oh, I got to shut it off. Sorry. Oh, I messed up. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. You can probably hear still the Serial Heel soundtrack. The outtakes are the best. Are the best part of
you
this.
can encourage people to go check it out. Thank you for showing that, Tom.
No, it's wonderful. I mean, it's a wonderful season. It's a wonderful atmosphere. But let's talk. I don't want to lose track. I do want to talk about the Ring that they just live broadcast. In fact, I think you had a closing evening on March 30th. It's probably
Last
a little
night,
unfair to. Yeah, I don't. Is there any way to access that now post fact, or was just?
I think, yeah, I think I can't do it, but I think you can go to the San Francisco Opera website. And I know that the content over the last month, they've shown an opera a week
Yeah.
and had a lot of great lectures and talks with singers and writers and thinkers.
Right.
And, of course, Donald Runnicles, who was the wonderful conductor of it. And it's a Ring that we did.
Sir Donald Runnicles.
Yes. Yes, I've been corrected. Yes. And there was a co-production with San Francisco Opera and Washington National Opera. And it's, I'm very proud of it. And
You birthed it in Washington.
we did the first three in Washington, and then we did Good Demmering and the whole cycles in San Francisco, then cycles in DC, and then San Francisco. Thankfully, it was so successful the first time they did cycles again in 2018. And
So can you?
and then
can
we did
you?
this festival.
This is so cruel, but can you give us a 500-foot look at what you were trying to do with the Ring? And I think people are so
Sure.
aware of the Ring. People are very aware of the Ring, and people know the different ways that the Ring has been, and comes from different standpoints, and tries to use the metaphors in a larger concept and so forth. So I don't think it's anything extraordinary that to explain to people that I hate the word concept, but what were you trying to do, and what you did so successfully? Why it just caught the imagination?
It was really inspired by America and by a lot of the iconography and visual language of this country, but also cinema. Wagner very much is an environmentalist and about the destruction of nature through man's greed and through industry. And so it sort of it began with Rheingold, set during the gold rush, and really destroying our land, and then about the great robber barons and the industrialists with Wotan and his family, and then it kind of went forward in time with Valkyrie to where we see the sort of world of Citizen Kane and the Second World War and sort of the great power of this. And by the time we got to Siegfried, we were in the sort of desolate, destroyed nature of the post-Vietnam era, and Good Demmering had a very futuristic feeling. And so for me, that was the setting with the production team. And, people have said American Ring, environmental Ring, and feminist Ring. And I think that really comes from just, making Brunhilde the hero that she is. The Wotan
Right.
can't see that she's the hero.
Right.
And I was blessed with wonderful casts each time. And doing it twice with Donald, who's a great conductor, who, knows the piece intimately. And it was for me, it was just like storytelling. It was like how to tell this story as clearly and humanly as possible, and making the gods as mortal-like in a way. And I think that was the success of the piece, was that we always had great ensemble casting. Music making was at a top level, and people were able to tell these stories in a way that for many of them, of course, they're American artists, to connect with Wagner's material, but also make it speak to audiences here. And it's not to say we didn't have a lot of international audiences, but I think that was part of the success of it.
Well, it's extraordinary, and I think, and my impression is that the echo of it since its inception and the various series has just grown and grown. Do you know where it's going to show up next?
Well, I can't. I mean, there's just a lot of discussion, and
it is going to show up next somewhere.
But I do think, actually, I think it's really important that theaters, when you do works of that scale, it's like the San Francisco and Washington Ring. I think it's good when a production stays, you create it for that theater.
Right.
And that was so, like, for me, I was inspired by Washington, the center of power.
Right.
And California, really the strongest part of the environmental movement in America, begins there in a way. And
Right.
so, and the power of the tech community. And so I don't necessarily know if it should go anywhere else so much as just coming back to
Right.
those theaters at an
Yeah, good.
appropriate time.
Yeah.
And there are so many amazing American Wagnerian singers and Europeans, of course, and Asians. So I think, it's anybody, when you've ever done the Ring, it's such a incredible community experience to be together. And I'm sure people have asked you at various points along your career. I certainly know that you've done Tannhäuser, and I'm sure people have asked you, when is Hans Sachs coming? And I don't know. So when is Hans Sachs coming?
I asked a very famous colleague who I was really close to before he died, what he thought of, because I have been offered Hans Sachs, and there's so much of that I would love to do, and he didn't
What do you
say
mean
anything.
so much of that? Right.
But yeah, exactly. So we're walking along, and he's actually totally quiet. I said, because he was another. Right. And at one point, he turns to Nix and he says, Thomas, the third act is very long.
Yeah, it is long. It's that scene with Ava. It's like an hour.
It's not just that it's long. It's at the end of two other very long acts. Sachs, you simply have to have the physical ability first. You got to have the throat and the stamina. Much less the memory. So anyway, I didn't get to it. I was offered a lot of things like that. I mean, I love the Wagner repertoire, but I pretty much stuck to Amfortas and Wolfram. I recorded Günther with Haitink back in the day, which was quite fun, with Ephraim Harton. That was loud. And John Thomason.
I saw you in that Parsifal, I think at Covent Garden, which you were.
We did. I did it Covent Garden and Paris, two different productions there.
Yeah.
And Gruber. In fact, it was Gruber in Covent Garden, and he was an incredible director. And we invited him.
He's a wonderful director. Yeah.
I did Dr. Faust in Zurich, and we invited him. And I tell you, we would always meet an hour before rehearsals. He hated rehearsing before 4 in the afternoon, so we'd meet at 2:30. We'd meet for 2:30 at he had to get sober first of all, and I'm not being a bitch. That's unfortunately what he died of, cirrhosis of the liver. I mean, he had a tremendous alcohol problem. But anyway, the point is that we would always meet for coffee and chat about Faust, and we spent a lot of time working through the original Faust to decipher Busoni's take on Faust, and that was for me just a unbelievable experience. I believe very much in this piece. I would like to do it again. One sort of a hurrah. There was some movement to do it in Italy. Italians have never embraced Ferruccio Busoni. And Ferruccio Busoni is probably another in that pantheon of dramatic, forgotten, elemental forces of music in our history. In his lifetime, Ferruccio Busoni was of gargantuan influence across the board, from conductors to pianists to composers, and has fallen into a kind of obscurity. And his writings on music are so unbelievably beautiful. But this isn't about Busoni. We'll talk about if you ever do want Faust, give me a call. Anyway, so we've talked about Glimmerglass. Thank you for doing that with the Ring. What because I know you've got meetings and everything else to do here, but give us something about Washington National Opera. Where's that going?
Well,
and maybe in that, Cheska, let's dig into the COVID time. I mean, what's happening? I agree with you completely. We're going digital, we're going regional, we're going ensemble. We are not going to go back to what we were. And I've said this to my young colleagues that I mentor now, and I said, whatever you thought your life was going to be in December 19, it is not that, nor will it be. And there's a certain confronting of that and moving forward. But from where you sit, balancing the artistic development of artists and administration, the production values, as well as that which will the public come visit, which is elemental to arts in America. What's your crystal ball telling us?
Well, I wish I knew. If I thought about life even a year ago to now, it's just...
It is impossible. I can't get my head around that. I never thought for a moment that we would have this conversation 12 months later.
The easy answer about Washington is it's the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy Center. And Washington National Opera, we will be back in business next season. We will be performing live as well as digital offerings. And we will be presenting special things that relate to the 50th anniversary. And I can't say more than that because the big announcement is coming in about 2 weeks. The bigger issue is really what is going to happen, particularly in America, where we have been through a real social revolution, which is, no one could have imagined this.
True.
I don't know if Europe feels the same, having not been there for so long. It feels very strange having been there so often. So we've been through social revolution, the pandemic, an economic revolution, political revolution. This country is completely changed. And of course, the arts have to reflect that. We need to reflect that and move forward. And most importantly, to find a way to be a bridge. I mean, that is my sort of personal view on this, is how can whatever we produce and whoever we employ and whoever we bring back into this field, because I do think getting artists back to work is number one important, is how can we try to create communication between the very disparate groups that we are feeling in this country. The incredible hatred, a river of hatred that is running through so many people in this country, how we can at least find a way to communicate through what we produce and who we offer it to, who we try to get into the theater, or do we bring it to them more live? Do we bring it in virtual? These are all the things that we're trying to answer in both Washington and Glimmerglass, and all of my colleagues who are working so hard, because it will never be like it was. And one would ask, should it be like it was? Probably not. But no. We should be finding ways to create new things. And that's sort of the great thing about America, is that we are inventors. We are like, pick ourselves up and come up with something new. That's part of our culture. True. Is, move west, change, find a new way to do it. And those are all the things that we're working on in both companies. And I know that, my European colleagues, some are doing that and some are looking at, what can we go back and keep from before. But America has changed so drastically in the last year. And ultimately, I believe in my heart it will be for the better. But we have to figure out, how does art communicate with that, and how does art help move us forward?
Well said. And in fact, what I do firmly believe, and we're the same cloth, is that there are no worthwhile investigations, discussions, think tanks, plans forward without the arts and humanities, and specifically the performing arts, part of that discussion. Very often I feel in America that, as an American, that the arts they're a hobby, or there's something someone gets into, or they're the high end of the entertainment industry. When in fact, what you're addressing and what you see so passionately and we see in your work and the person who you are, is that the arts are the storyboard of who we are. And that's what we have to protect. That's what we have to revitalize. That's what we have to pass on to every generation. This enabling empowerment of our younger colleagues to take that, to protect that story and all of the stories. And this river of hatred has a lot of tributaries that have different stories in the arts that we need to tell those stories too. This isn't some sort of progressive leftist agenda here. This is about understanding who we are as a culture. And I fear for the various roads we've gone down in the last 3, 4, 5 months. And we don't want to make this a political road here. But with all of that, and with many friends from different political spectrums in the world, I do believe that one of the endemic qualities of moving forward, trying to create our tipping point of a new consciousness, mitigated hatred, if you will, is without question through the arts and the humanities. And if we don't, and Kennedy Center with the 50-year anniversary is just in the perfect position for that. And so I'm so glad you're there. I mean, forgive my little preaching to the chorus here, but I'm just, no. you inspire me to these, yes, Francesca, you're right. I'm right behind you. I'm right behind you,
and we need all of our colleagues and all of artists. Yeah. And we are all going to have to work for it together. I mean, that's the thing, is that we're all trying to figure it out. We're really trying to figure it out. And I appreciate your support. And certainly it's now the divide between Europe and America does feel bigger than it used to. It used to be we had the common language as artists and music, but now it feels bigger. And so I know we don't want to get into that in this kind of discussion, this forum, and like we're like basically done. But I hope that people watching and others will think about these things, and how, as I always tell young artists now, young singers and stuff, I say, think about what you can do with your art to bring about effective and positive change, whether that means offering up your art in a new way, whether it's online or whether it's becoming active in a social, like get your church to be behind you as an artist and you be behind your church, or whatever it takes. Go and sing in a food pantry, do something for somebody besides yourself right now, because that's what it's going to take to get us through this.
And you have obviously inspired people. I mean, in your orbit, the singers that I could name and the various amazingly innovative projects that they've come up with. And I've interviewed a couple of them, I'm living vicariously in some of this. I've been over here for over a year. I can't get back to the States. It would be irresponsible of me to sit 13 hours in a plane full of who knows what. Maybe it's going to get better soon. I've got a 90-year-old mother that I'd like to see quickly, and she's in great shape. We Zoom. I've got her on Zoom, every so often, I've got grandkids that are getting older, We all have our stories, This is a rough time, but we will get through it. And with leadership like yours, and innovation that you're inspiring, it's great. It's wonderful to get caught up. Give Faith my love. I'll tell Andrea hi, and we're going to say goodnight, ladies and gentlemen. Hang on, Cheska. I do have a question for you behind the scenes. Sorry, everybody.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us tonight. IDAGIO live on IDAGIO.com. Check it out. IDAGIO.com is a wonderful streaming platform for classical music. You can't imagine how many millions of tracks are there on your iPhone, your iPad, your computer, whatever you want. Only classical, curated by classical musicians, put up in, if it's Allegro, it stays Allegro, it doesn't move around. Wonderful. Adagio Live, where you can have everything from Ivan Fischer talking about Mahler to Thomas Hampson chatting with the world, which I truly love. And of course, we have the Global Concert Hall, which is really an exciting development, exactly along the lines what Francesca Zambello and I are discussing today. The Global Concert Hall is a platform, not a production company. It just simply makes live events possible in the digital universe. And that's very, very exciting. So check it out. Have a good time. I will see you all